All right, what's up, guys? Hey, we have a Karl Swanepoel here. He lives in Wales. He is the CEO of Revolancer. So, how you doing today, Karl?
I'm doing very well, thanks. How about you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me, first of all. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. Um, so like you mentioned, I'm the CEO of Revolancer. So I'm a founder of a tech startup. We're a freelance marketplace that connects freelancers and small businesses, essentially. And I've been running this business for about 2 years since I was in my final year of university. And I always wanted to start a business since I was around 13 years old. I started my journey by freelancing, and I then identified issues with the industry that now I look to solve and do something about with Revolancer.
Okay, cool. And where did you go to? So you told me before you grew up in South Africa, right?
I did.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
so
then
actually, funnily enough, I was born in the same hospital, I believe anyway, and definitely the same city as Elon Musk, who's a bit of a controversial figure to say the least nowadays.
yeah.
But yeah, I grew up in the same city as him. But when I was 8, I my family and I moved to Germany and then eventually to the UK as well.
Okay. I was gonna ask if you knew Elon, but um, okay. So where did you go to college?
I studied in Wales, in a little town called Aberystwyth on the west coast, by the sea, which was really nice. Um, but yeah, I mean, I always wanted to start a business, so that is what I spent more time focusing on, more so than the university work. And well, I mean, so far it looks to be paying off, which I'm very, very grateful for.
Yeah, that's cool. And how old are you now?
I'm 23 right now.
Oh wow, so you're young. You're like one of those like young tech genius guys.
Well, I mean, I'd say I'm a young tech guy. I don't know about the rest of it. But no, I mean, I've been sort of, like I said, I got started at around 13, 14 years of age, kind of at that point ignoring school and building websites, like learning how to build websites, and eventually going on to getting like paid clients for some basic design work, some like basic web design stuff. So I've been like building lots of different projects over the past 10 years. So I've got probably more you know professional experience, let's say, than most 23-year-olds, I would guess.
Yeah. I feel like yeah, like in a good way, you seem, older than I am, but I am much older than you. So you know what I mean? Just by how much you've done so far. Um, yeah, so some of the stuff that I'm interested in is kind of like tech, obviously, and kind of like the future of tech with AI and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how much you know about that. And then also also interested in kind of like it sounds like you guys deal with maybe probably I'm sure you probably know a lot about like social media, like marketing, that kind of stuff, like YouTube, Instagram. um yeah, so that's kind of like where I'm at in terms of what I'm interested in, but I want to definitely go over your company and what exactly you guys do. So if you can kind of go into depth for your company a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. And first of all, I'll just say my degree at university that I paid some attention to alongside starting the business was in AI and robotics. So it's
Okay.
definitely an area of interest for me as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of starting the business, like I said, about 10 years ago, I started freelancing because I decided one day I wanted to be my own boss. I don't know like why I decided that. I didn't have a good reason, but I just kind of thought I will never be happy working for someone else. Just kind of an instinct I had, I guess. So
You're right about that.
oh, I was right about that. I don't know
Yeah.
though. I haven't gotten that many things right in my life, but that I got right somehow. But yeah, so I knew back then, okay, if I wanted to work for myself, like I really need to make something crazy work. So I Googled, just started by Googling how to make money online. I saw that people would sell their like services, like web development and stuff on freelancing platforms. So I joined a couple of those back then, quite quickly realized that these platforms just really don't work for freelancers, and it's kind of messed up how they work in my view. So I quite quickly went to, well, I started my own freelancing platform back then as well, but I started approaching clients directly, and I set up a small agency in my local town when I was a teenager as well. And then, kind of a few years later, went to university. I studied AI and robotics, like I mentioned. And then halfway through my final year, we were in the middle of a COVID lockdown. I knew that I wanted to start a business. Obviously, COVID has completely, accelerated, changed, disrupted remote work. And I had a look back at these freelancing platforms that I started on, years before. And to my greatest shock and horror, they hadn't changed how they operate at all. And one of the problems with how a lot of these big platforms operate is because they take a commission fee. So, if I pay you $100, you'll only get $80 because they take a 20% commission. Because that's how they make money, we cannot speak outside of the platform. That means we can't exchange email address, we can't hop on a phone call, we can't hop on a Zoom call, anything like that, because then, we could speak and we could arrange to pay outside of the platform, and then these large platforms, they don't get their commission fee. So what that means is, by relying on commission fees, is they're basically stuck in like the early 2000s in terms of, remote work, where you're basically just like writing, like chat messages through that portal to each other. And that's the only way you can communicate. So that's what I was looking to solve, like basically build a freelancing platform that's compatible with modern day remote work. It's fairer to freelancers. And the way we did that is by scrapping commission fees, which means that freelancers and clients can talk outside of the platform without issue, because we're not relying on commission fees. We're instead relying on subscription fees for additional tools and services. So that was my plan. I started that business halfway through my final year, paid more attention to that than to university. Luckily, didn't flunk out. So I graduated that, not last year now, but in 2021 in summer. And I saw that my university had a startup competition where you could pitch your startup and then win a few different cash prizes. So the main prize was £10,000. There were a couple of smaller ones as well. There was one for £3,000 and then a few more. And I entered that competition with my idea, and I was fortunate enough to win the two main cash prizes. So that was £13,000, which I then used as seed capital. And then within 6 months, we secured VC backing. So SFC Capital, they're a venture capital firm based in London, invested in our pre-seed round. And so that was a year ago. And now, a year later, we're about halfway through raising our seed round right now.
All right. It sounds good. And how many, you said you guys have subscribers. So how many subscribers do you have so far? Do you know?
I do know. So I'm not sure I can share the exact number on here, but we're generating some nice early revenue that's growing at a fast month-on-month rate as well. Freelancers do like the paid plan quite a lot.
Yeah, things are going good. Okay. And then who are some of your competitors? I know of would TaskRabbit be one of them, that type of thing? I've heard of some of these where you can get like gig work through apps and stuff.
So to a degree, basically our platform is for anything that can be done remotely and benefits a small business. So not everything that TaskRabbit kind of services we cover. I'd say more direct competitors are things like Fiverr and Upwork, Freelancer.com, People Per Hour, TopTel, those kind of platforms. But we have a very strong kind of unique edge, which is that we don't rely on commission fees, and therefore we can allow people to talk outside of the platform, which all of the platforms I mentioned just now, they do rely on commission fees and therefore can't allow that.
Yeah, so why is that? If they rely on commission fees, why can't they allow people to talk off of the platform?
Well, let's say I'm a freelancer and you're looking to hire me, and I'm charging you $1,000. And let's say we're on Fiverr right now, and I'm charging you $1,000. You'll pay $1,050 because there's a 5% client fee. I will receive $800 because there's a 20% freelancer fee. So in essence, at this point, you're paying $1,050 and I'm getting $800. So I'm not going to realistically be able to, deliver on the value of the work you paid for. So let's say now in that same world, we can talk over email. Why don't we just say over email, hey, why don't you just PayPal me 900, 1,000, so we can kind of maybe split the difference. And it's really appealing to do because the commission fee is so big. So that's why they can't allow people to talk outside the platform.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I mean, is there any way that like you would still be able to like talk with somebody else? You know what I mean? Like, can't you just be like, hey man, can you just give me your email or whatever and we'll talk off here?
You absolutely can, and people do it successfully all the time. But if they catch you, and they do actively look for this, if they catch you, they will ban you from the platform. One of the big players will also try and fine you, which is just unbelievably ridiculous. I'm not going to say who it is, but one of the big players genuinely tries to fine people.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a good business model to be fighting your customers or just booting them off, So I don't know how they prevent that. But so I'm a photographer, videographer, and also do this podcast. But I've tried, and it's honestly I haven't put in enough effort, but I've tried to do some of those. Like I think I tried TaskRabbit, maybe Fiverr, and it just, from what I heard from other people and from what I experienced myself, it wasn't great. But like I said, I didn't really put in enough effort myself, so I can't really totally dog them. But I think my experience with them just wasn't that great. I didn't end up getting any gigs or anything like that. So yeah, do you guys have like are you guys on the App Store first of all, like the iPhone App Store?
So currently not, and that's just because basically, it's either on the client side, businesses hiring, freelance on the platform. On the freelancer side, it's people who are working. So in the vast majority of cases, people access the website from their computer. They can easily upload images, write bigger messages, that kind of thing. So we've found that the demand for an app from our user base has actually been really low, especially because the website works on a mobile phone just fine as well. But we are planning to launch an app in the future because I think there's a special benefit from getting like notifications and messages when you're on the go outside of just getting them via email.
Yeah, there is something about having the app that just does make it better for me, at least. Because I mean, I mostly use my phone so much more than my computer, and phones can do so much that it's just nice to be able to have the app on the phone, especially I don't know, for some reason, Apple, just anything that's like on the Apple iPhone just seems to do well. You know what I mean? Because the iPhone's so popular, you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but so if I wanted to like go on your website and use this for, let's say, for me, like videography or photography, or even maybe the podcast, I don't know how, like, can you walk me through how I would go ahead and do that in like the best way of doing that?
Yeah, sure. So essentially you'd go to the website, you'd click, create an account. You'd then say you're a freelancer, just fill out the information. And then once you've made your account, you can complete your profile. But then basically you have two routes to go down. One is you can create some service listings. So that's basically, where you say, I'm a videographer, I charge X amount per hour, kind of book me. These are details of my service. And then people can book you directly. Or the other thing, and you can do both of these. I mean, most people do both. The other thing is you can go and look at where clients are asking for a videographer in your location. And then you can, and they've kind of said, I'm looking for a videographer, I'm looking to pay this much. And you can then send them an offer, like a sort of a bid. And then they can, respond to that and hire you that way. So there's kind of like a passive side where you have your list of your services up, and people can find you. And then there's an active side of bidding on client projects.
Okay. Yeah. And so it almost kind of reminds me of like a new way of kind of like doing a better new way of doing like Craigslist, because I know like before to find this type of work, you'd probably have to go on Craigslist or something, right? And then like find someone and email them or whatever. But now this is just like an easier way of combining people for this type of thing. And what would you say are the best? What does the best on there? Like if I'm like looking to get, because that's essentially kind of what it is, right? It's kind of like a gig, essentially kind of like a gig work type thing. If I'm looking to do gig work and I want to do it this way, basically through your website, what do you think is what does the best on there?
I mean, in terms of the services that do the best, like the most popular category is graphic design. And that's followed by web development, marketing, and media related. So, videography and photography would fall under our media, like, main category. So those are the four most popular categories. But we do have clients looking for services kind of across the board. But it's, the clients are predominantly small to medium-sized businesses. So the kind of work that's offered on the platform, that does the best, it is work that can benefit a small business. Like, you need some headshots for your employees, you need a brochure design, you need a menu design, you need a new website, that kind of thing. That tends to do best.
Okay. And are you guys worldwide?
We are, yeah. So the platform's been international for about a year now.
Okay, great. And that includes everywhere. Like when they say worldwide, I kind of like I work for Amazon and I kind of wonder how many countries, like, are you literally able to be in every country? I mean, I know there's probably some like third world countries that maybe aren't able to do this kind of thing, or is every country now able to do it?
There are some limitations, but for the most part, like, for example, the payment support doesn't work for all countries because PayPal, who we use for payments, isn't supported everywhere. But people can still pay outside of the platform. So if a client is willing to pay a freelancer through a different service that works in their country, even though PayPal doesn't, then that's absolutely fine. But yeah, within reason, there are obviously some countries where we just can't support. But within reason, most of the work is done remotely, via the platform. So we are very flexible in terms of location.
Yeah, and then how I've always, this is like a personal question, but I've always kind of like wondered how hard being a CEO is. Like, is it a very stressful job? What are your like hours like? What kind of things do you have to be good at in order to be like a CEO and run your own company?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think also there's a distinction to be made between like a CEO of, like, let's say, a big Fortune 500 company, or versus like a startup CEO. I think the roles are very, very, very different. I think, like, obviously I can't speak on the being like a Fortune 500 CEO, but like being a startup CEO, like, also the founder of your own company. I mean, your two main responsibilities are, first of all, making sure that there's a good company culture and that you have a good team with the right mindset that works together really well. And then your second main responsibility is making sure that you don't run out of money. So there are obviously there's a lot more to it, but those are the main two things you should be focusing on. In terms of whether it's hard, yes, I would say, like, I mean, it's very much has its ups and downs. Like starting a business, running an early stage startup, you can have some incredible highs, but you can also have some, like really, really low lows. I think what's quite I think probably the bit that I find the hardest is the responsibility that I feel for the people around me, because I have essentially said to a group of people, I see an opportunity here, I'd like to start a business, I'd like you to come along on this journey, and I'd like to give you a job, and now it's sort of they're relying on me for that job, for this idea working out. And the stats just show that most early stage startups fail. I certainly hope we won't, but statistically speaking, it's definitely possible. So, I feel a real responsibility to do my absolute best, that if something were to go wrong and if the company were to not succeed, then I wouldn't want to feel like I could have done more for the people who are basically trusting me and relying on me and my judgment and what we're trying to build here. So I'd say that's probably the hardest part. In terms of like hours worked, it's definitely more than a 9 to 5, but also I try not to go kind of too crazy with it. So maybe like 50 hours a week or so is probably typical for me right now. I used to do a lot more than that. I burnt myself out terribly, so it was a really dumb idea. But also, if you take proper care of yourself, if you get enough sleep, kind of eat well, exercise, spend plenty of time like doing stuff outside of work, even if you work fewer hours, so like let's say like 8, 9, 10, I mean like 9 and 10 hours per day is obviously still like quite a lot, but 8, 9, 10 hours a day instead of like 12 or 14 or something like that, you can actually get a lot more done in a lot less time and feel a lot happier and refreshed doing it. And that's something I've had to learn the hard way, because I used to think like the more hours worked, that's just better. Whereas from personal experience now, I know that's just really not the case. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And yeah, I've always just kind of like wondered what's like, I know it's probably different for every CEO, but like in some cases, like my job, specifically, I like never even see the owner of he's not really, I don't think he'd be considered like, I work for Amazon. I'm a delivery driver, and they have separate companies like driving for them, so like independent contractors or whatever. So with my company, I never even see the owner, and I'm kind of like, how much work is this guy even doing? So I've kind of wondered in a lot of situations, like I'm sure you do a lot of work, especially being a startup, but like with Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, I know Elon Musk is supposedly works a lot, but with a lot of these Mark Zuckerbergs, I'm assuming these guys are probably working a lot, but like I don't even really know what someone like Jeff Bezos does on a day to day. You know what I mean? It's like at this point, he's not even the head guy anymore. Right? I think he dropped out of Amazon. Yeah. But when he was, like, what kinds of things is he doing on a day to day? Is it mostly just the very top, kind of like giving like speeches and like making like really big ideas, or like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how much you know about what like he does, but you kind of see what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Also, like I have a personal theory on, like Elon Musk working so much, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any evidence to support this, but I think he might be exaggerating. And I think the same thing is true for a lot of, very high profile, very successful people. Because I mean, with taking Elon Musk for example, he is, I think, very good at crafting a certain image about himself. Sort of like this genius, like guy who is going to save humanity. But if you look into him, and if you look at some of the stuff he does, it's maybe a bit questionable. Also, I question how someone who works 16-hour days has time to tweet like 50 times every day. And also buy, when he's the CEO of Tesla, buy Twitter now, where, and sort of neglect Tesla to the point where his, I think is like the third largest shareholder in Tesla is like trying to get him out now. So I don't know how he has time. I mean, I'm skeptical about, like, yeah, okay, maybe he is like sort of working, meaning he's like talking to people or connected to email something for 16 hours a day. But I think maybe how hard that work is maybe different, what he'll say to what the reality is. So yeah, I mean, I think, but the problem with Elon Musk, which is less of a problem with like Jeff Bezos, is Elon Musk is like so integral to all of his companies. I mean, I know that a lot is going on with the market, but I think I mean, Tesla's stock has dropped by something like 70% since the beginning of the year. And yes, a lot of companies are doing like worse at the moment than in 2021, just because of what the market is doing in general. But I can't help but think that some part of that is basically Elon Musk's personal behavior influencing that, outside of the decisions he's making internally, just what he's like talking about on Twitter, what he's saying in interviews, whether he's at Tesla or not at Tesla, and that kind of stuff. Whereas I think if Elon Musk were to disappear, if he were to die or something, I don't think Tesla would be in a very good position. I don't think they've got a good succession plan. Whereas, for example, Jeff Bezos stepped down from Amazon. I can't remember when, but he did at some point, not too long ago, step down as CEO from Amazon. And well, I mean, okay, I mean, they seem to be doing fine. It's not such a big thing. If that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's I think once people get to that stage, they may be like more kind of celebrities than actually, involved properly in the decision making and the running of the company. They're more sort of there for TV interviews and their own personal image and that kind of thing. It's not to say that, that's a blanket statement or whatnot, but I think to a degree, there's a lot more publicity stuff than actual growth and being involved in the company at that point, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I always just kind of like wonder, like, am I working harder than the owner or the CEO? You know what I mean? And it's like my job's. It just seems kind of weird to me that like, and I don't know. That's the thing is I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. But like, it seems weird to me. Like it seems like sometimes the lower level jobs that pay less, it's almost like they seem to have more work than the higher up jobs. You know what I mean? But
it's
like
quite possibly the case. Like, yeah, it's quite likely the case. Yeah.
Yeah. And my dad always said like shit rolls downhill or whatever. Like, like basically the hardest job is at the bottom or whatever. But so yeah, with Elon Musk, I'm, very interested in him and everything that's going on with him and everything else in the tech, crypto world or whatever. But I don't know how much you know about like the crypto world. I don't know if you do follow the.
I mean, I follow it. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I know the basics.
Yeah. Do you invest in crypto at all?
I've never invested in crypto, no.
No. Yeah. So with Elon Musk, which is obviously, he might be the most popular person in the world right now, but so I listened to, at first when he first came on, or when I first learned about him, I was like, I like this guy a lot. And even though he comes off as some sort of like business magnate, like genius, and obviously he must be good at what he does because he's so wealthy and he has so many companies, but he also came off to me in his interviews as kind of like somewhat humble almost, or because, he has Asperger's, or whatever, like he almost comes off like nervous or kind of like not a very good speaker, which made him very likable. And I still would say that I like him, but I've listened to some podcasts recently where they basically say that he's like somewhat of like a grifter. And I don't know how much truth there is to it. And the one podcast I listened to was actually this podcast is called TrueAnon, where they did like 2 or 3 hour episodes on him. And to me, it didn't like really prove the point that he was a grifter, but the main thing that they kind of were coming down on him for mainly was, I guess it would be one that a lot of the money he's gotten has basically been from the government, like because the government was giving out so many loans for EV cars or whatever, or EV, electric vehicles, that he really kind of exploited that. I don't even really necessarily want to say exploited. I guess he was smart enough to use that. But then two, he really doesn't seem to do as much as he says he does. And like, that's obvious by like what you just said with like how much he tweets. I mean, the guy's constantly tweeting and constantly even like commenting and like getting involved with conversations on there. It's just kind of obvious this guy isn't probably working as much as he says he is. So yeah, anyways, but with that being said, like I don't, and there's this, yeah. So I also have like I don't know. There's people who love Elon Musk. Like it tends to be the Republicans. I don't really want to get too political, but it tends to be like the Republicans love Elon Musk, and now the liberals seem to be kind of like going after him. And to me, it's just kind of like any type of hero worship kind of bothers me, I think. And I think to a certain extent, I have kind of like a contrarian viewpoint when it comes to, just because the guy is super wealthy doesn't mean I'm, gonna kiss his ass or anything. It's just kind of like, okay, so good for him, he's doing well, but I don't necessarily think that he should be getting all the praise that he does. But anyways, that was a long thing on that. So my opinion on Elon Musk. But so yeah, in terms of I definitely want to get into AI, robotics, and then also electric vehicles, like Tesla. But in terms of the gig economy, like, and essentially kind of like virtual work and all that kind of stuff, do you think that's going to become more and more prevalent into the future? I'm assuming it will be.
Yeah, without a doubt, I think it's very likely to become a lot more prevalent. I mean, I've seen a projection that by 2027, more than half of the US workforce will be freelancers. And as of right now, there are 1.56 billion freelancers in the world, which accounts for just under a third of the global workforce. So, it's very much a growing way of work. But I think that we need to be careful about how exactly that gets realized, because I mean, I'm a big supporter of the gig economy. I think it brings a lot of benefits, but I also think that if we are not very careful about how it's brought in, it can lead to people being exploited and kind of losing the protections that they would have with regular employment, just by kind of being freelancers and gig workers. But then on the other hand, if you have systems in place to account for that, it's a way for people to be their own boss, set their own hours, earn a lot more than they would otherwise, working a 9 to 5. So I think, yeah, it's a mixed bag, but it's really, and I think it's definitely coming, but it's really important that we make sure that it's brought out in a way that actually benefits everyone, instead of just kind of the people, the companies that supply gig workers, or companies that are hiring gig workers, but actually that it benefits the gig workers too, because it is a great way of living and working. You just have to make sure that you are, well protected.
Yeah, because I told you I'm an Amazon delivery driver, but then I also do the Amazon. You've probably heard of Amazon Flex, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do they have Amazon Flex out there in Wales?
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
possibly.
but you've heard of it. So yeah, I do Amazon Flex too, and I personally like Amazon Flex more because, for one, like you said earlier, like you're pretty much your own boss, you're an independent contractor or whatever, and they'll give me like a 4-hour block, and it'll be like $100, and you basically just go pick up the packages, deliver them, and then go home, and that's it. It's And in my opinion, $100 for 4 hours is good. A lot of times I'll finish 2 or 3 hours because it's just, it only takes that long. So yeah, personally, I haven't really done any of the other ones like Grubhub or Uber or anything like that. But Amazon Flex, I think, is good. And ideally, I mean, I would almost like want to live in a world where Amazon Flex I could just do that full time. And I don't know if I can. That's part of the reason why I haven't quit my job with the Amazon, is because I don't know if it would be enough. It's kind of hard to like predict. And then also with gas and wear and tear on your car and all that, and no insurance. But yeah, so in terms of like so in going towards AI and robotics, and then also electric vehicles, how soon do you think it'll be before it gets to the point where, well, we'll just start with electric vehicles, where electric vehicles are, a regular thing on the road, where like they're actually taking over my job for driving and all that?
That I think is like a lot further away. I mean, I'll tell you, like at least in the UK, do you know the London Underground? There's
I don't.
it's the subway in London.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Basically, yeah. So the trains in the London Underground have been completely autonomous since 1984. But because of regulatory compliance, there has to be a driver who is paid about £60,000, just, I don't know, like $70,000-80,000 a year, to basically just sit at the front of the train and do absolutely nothing. But like maybe if the train malfunctions or there needs to be an emergency stop, even though the train can do that automatically, maybe the driver needs to just take over and hit a button or something. But basically the driver just sits there and does nothing. But the driver has to be there because of regulatory compliance. Now, that's an underground train, which means, like it's very, it's going on a rail. It's not likely that, a car or like a, I don't know, deer or something is going to get onto the tracks. It's a very like safe environment in that regard. Yet still, the regulators do, even though it's autonomous, been autonomous since 1984, that's nearly 40 years, still the regulators will not allow for them to actually run without a human driver, even though it would probably be perfectly safe. There would never be an issue, or like very rarely. With that being said, the cars, or vans or trucks or whatever, are so like there are so many more things that can go wrong. You're not on a rail. There are other things going on the road, other cars. You may not be able to predict how they drive. You have to follow traffic rules, red light, traffic signs, all this kind of stuff. Wind, rain, ice. Like there are so many things that can just mess that whole situation up. So even if you have a car that can drive around autonomously, which is much harder to do, and Tesla isn't there yet, they have said, Elon Musk has said every single year since, I think it was either around 2013. So for about 10 years now, he has said every single year, next year we'll have full self-driving. And then again, next year we'll have full self-driving. So he's kept saying it. They still haven't delivered it. But let's say for argument's sake, they had it. They had full self-driving that's safer than a human driver. From a regulatory standpoint, I do not know how likely it would be for a regulator to actually allow that. Because the other issue is as well, like, what if a car is in full self-driving mode and then kills someone? What if it crashes into a pedestrian? Let's say the car is 10 times less likely to do that than a human would, but still the car was in control when that happened. Like, who's responsible? Is the owner of the car responsible? Is the car manufacturer responsible? Is no one responsible? There are so many unanswered questions there. Also, there are other issues like like the trolley problem. Would you flip the lever, like a train's going towards people on the track, would you flip a lever that it only kills one person instead of six? And if you do nothing, it'll kill six. That, like, how does that play into the car's full self-driving decision making in a situation like that? So I genuinely think that the problems there are so big that we probably won't see that for decades still. I think like we'll definitely see way more electric cars on the road sooner, but actual like full self-driving in a way that will take jobs away from like delivery drivers or something, I don't think that's something that's realistic in a long time from now still.
Yeah, I agree with you, just for all the reasons you said, and it seems like it would just be such a massive like overhaul to the whole, to the roads or whatever. And then yeah, so but I have talked to some people, and there are some people who do think it will be within, I don't know, like 5 or 10 years. And like, do you know the laws on it now? Because I have a friend who I think he uses the self-driving. Like, are you allowed to use self-driving as long as like you're there, like kind of like ready to take over if something happens? Or like, do you even know the laws on it now?
I think it depends which country you're in. I know for Teslas, I believe in the UK and the US, most likely you kind of have to. I think in the UK you have to hold the wheel the whole time, which is kind of silly, to have full self-driving at that point. And in the US, I think you have to touch the wheel every now and then. I think Teslas also have cameras that will, like look whether you're watching the road, or like looking away for too long, and in that case it'll like stop at the side of the road and tell you, you need to pay attention. So yeah, I think there are still like laws restricting its use, like to the point where it's basically glorified cruise control in a lot of cases.
Yeah, yeah. And so in terms of like AI and robotics, when do you think that'll really get to a point where it takes over jobs also, I guess? And I would imagine it'll be a while too, right?
Well, I mean, I think it's already started, and so something, like just sort of machines taking over people's jobs with technology. I think it's all very much already happening. Like, for example, in supermarkets, these sort of self-checkouts and things, okay, you still need a couple of members of staff to, in case something goes wrong, to fix it. But, like a bunch of self-checkouts can mean that now suddenly there are 10 less cashiers that, need to work in a supermarket. So that, and of course, Amazon also has these new stores where, there are no human staff. You basically just pick stuff off the shelves, it'll keep track of it. And then when you walk out, your Amazon accounts get charged. So that's already happening. I mean, ChatGPT is out. There have already been copywriting AIs for a while. So I'd say it's, certainly more likely now that someone might use something like ChatGPT if they want an article written, than hiring a freelancer, maybe, as they might have done 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. Like, I'm not saying it happens in all cases. It probably happens in the minority of cases, but the demand is going to be affected by some people choosing to use an AI copywriting tool. And I think, there are instances of that in a lot of different industries. So it's already happening. I mean, these, like a self-checkout isn't particularly like technologically advanced. It's not artificial intelligence or anything like that, but still it is a piece of technology that can make a large number of people's jobs essentially redundant. So I think, oh, and the other big problem with ChatGPT is it can write code. So, it can, for a lot of basic coding tasks, that can, will be a lot cheaper than hiring a developer. That's for sure.
It's kind of like code that can write code.
Yeah, so you can tell ChatGPT to, write me a Twitter scraper that does X, Y, and Z, and then it will just output you the code, and then you can just run that, and then there you go. So it's just like if you were to hire a developer and give them that task, but except for it's free and it does it instantly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's already happening. It's gradually happening. But it's going to be a huge problem in the like short to probably more like medium term future. I think it'll be a very big problem.
Yeah, so you actually think that it's going to be happening more with other jobs as opposed to like self-driving, like trucker jobs, which is I've heard the opposite viewpoint too, where like I think people tend to think that like the first job it'll take will be like the truck driver jobs, whereas you're saying it's already happened.
Strongly.
Yeah. And I actually do too, just because like I've had people, not talk down to me or those jobs, but it's like I think people think that like, oh, those jobs are easy, anyone can do it, like an AI can do it or whatever. But it's like, there's really a lot of responsibility in driving a big semi truck or even a van, or because it's like you can kill someone, like, you know what I mean? Like it's like, and it's like you said, if you do kill someone while driving, who's going to be blamed for it? Somebody's got to be held accountable. And I would assume that there will be laws put in place. I would hope that the company maybe will be held accountable. I don't know, but somebody will have to pay for the, other vehicle that got damaged or the person who got hurt or whatever. But yeah, I tend to agree with you. What about jobs like, well, first of all, let's go into ChatGPT, because I've heard about it and I listened to a podcast on it, but do you think that's going to take over like kind of like journalism jobs and what else? I mean, any type of writing job, even maybe a podcast?
So I think definitely some writing jobs. I'd say not journalism because ChatGPT, at least currently, is anything before 2021. Sorry, anything after 2021 it doesn't know about because it's trained on information from before 2021. So one of the things I asked it was who does it think will replace Elon Musk as the Twitter CEO? And then ChatGPT told me that Elon Musk is not the Twitter CEO and will not, it's not likely to become the CEO either. So, it doesn't like have all the up-to-date information.
So
But
it's
that
all
being
kind of like
said,
delayed.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like up to date until about 2021. But that being
Yeah.
said, you can ask it like, to write a recipe for you. So to write an article. So like blogs, can be you can kind of write blog content for it. You can write social media content for it, like marketing copy. Those kind of things I think are possibly most at risk, other than coding, because nothing, like, obviously not too complicated stuff, but if you ask it to like put together a basic piece of software for you, it can do that instantly for free. And that's going to start, like for like more junior developers, it's going to start like kind of approaching on their jobs and on what they can do. So I think that's where the danger with chat gpt and things like that lie, and it's only going to improve in the future as well, even though chat gpt now is already very impressive what it can do.
Yeah. And I mean, would you be able to tell it to like scrape the internet? Like, let's just say there was like, like just recently there was like this Idaho murders or whatever. I don't know if you heard about those, but
No,
yeah,
I
there
haven't.
was like I don't know too much about it, but there was like some murders in Idaho of college girls by this guy. And would you be able to be like scrape the internet, get all the data on this, these murders or whatever happened, whatever you want to write the story about, and then write a story on it? Like, even though it's delayed from 2021, couldn't it just like scrape the internet, or no?
In its I'm pretty sure in its current form it can't, but what you could do is copy and paste. I mean, probably, I haven't tried this, but what you could probably do is copy and paste the text over from a new article like that and ask it to summarize it for you, or ask it to I don't know, write a longer version to rewrite it, something like that. It could probably do.
Yeah, that's one thing I've wondered about. Like, I'm kind of surprised that like with news articles, it almost seems like somebody could just go in and have an AI just reword the whole article, change it up a bit or whatever, and then just like repost it. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, I guess the most important thing to do in journalism or that type of like news article would be to like try and get the story first. So whoever gets the story first probably gets the most clicks. But it seems like anybody could just go in and like you know, just reword that, which sounds like chat gpt can do. And so chat gpt was started by open ai, right? They're like the
It
company
was, yeah.
behind it. Yeah. And what kinds of other things is open ai doing, do you know, besides chat gpt?
I don't have a too kind of up to date kind of knowledge on them. I know that Elon Musk used to be involved with OpenAI. I believe he resigned from the board in 2018 or so. But OpenAI was founded by Sam Altman, who's also involved with Y Combinator. But they have done some interesting things from a while ago, but more kind of like nerdy kind of AI things that are, I think Chat GPT is, it's definitely the first thing that they've released that is like really, interesting to well, basically everyone, because it's like it's fun to play around with, but then on like a personal side, but then also from a business side, like you can get it to write a blog post for you, you can get it to do all this kind of interesting stuff for you. So I think that's kind of definitely what brought them into the limelight.
Yeah. And then there's also the like the artist ones, like the paintings and the drawings that are coming
Yeah.
out. I'm forgetting the name of the app or whatever that does that. Do you know the name of it?
I know what you mean, but I don't know any specific names.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if it's going to get to a point where like you could just have this AI draw you a painting, and then you can like just, you know, put it on Instagram or whatever, and say this is mine. You know, you know what I mean? It's like, and I think they're starting to do like videos even too. So, but yeah. So as far as the future of, yeah. So have you heard about like the singularity and all that kind of stuff, like Ray
Of
Kurzweil?
course, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think? So I think Ray Kurzweil is under the impression that like, you know, he's going to live forever. And at this point, I think he's like in his 70s or something, right? I heard him on a Lex Friedman podcast. Have you heard of Lex Friedman podcast?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think about that kind of stuff? Like the really kind of crazy, you know, futuristic outlook, and then also the singularity. I still don't really think that I've fully grasped what it means, but it sounds like it's when we get to a place where everything's just going so fast in terms of technology that like you just can't keep up with it, right? Isn't that what the singularity is?
Well, basically, like the singularities, you know, like right now we are building AI and we're kind of incrementally improving it. The singularity is the point where AI is like developing itself, but it will like develop itself at a faster rate than we can. And at that point, you know, it'll kind of go like that in terms of what it can do. That's so it's basically the point where AI develops itself at a faster rate than humans can, and you know, and it kind of just, you know, accelerates so fast that we can't keep up, and are kind of made obsolete probably. I don't think that's realistically going to happen anytime soon. I think the practical applications of AI are much more so in something like ChatGPT, or you know, I mean, a self-checkout isn't really AI, but you know, more in things like that, like utilities that have a single purpose rather than like sort of a more general AI. In terms of like wanting to live forever, I mean, I don't think that. I think that, you know, people probably would get quite sick of that. You know, like if someone was able to live for, say, a few hundred years, I think it's all well and good wanting that when you're, I don't know, 50, 70, whatever. But maybe after 200 years, 300 years, 400 years, I don't know if you'll still want that. I also wouldn't, I personally wouldn't want that at all. I mean, you know, I want to live a long and happy life, but I don't want to live like, you know, 200 years or something crazy like that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how possible this stuff is. I think there are certainly some things that can be done to extend life. You know, there are some companies working on it. Another one is, I believe, I don't know what they're doing right now, but Calico, is the California Life Company. They're a Google subsidiary. That's what they're focused on working on too. But yeah, I mean, I know it's a field that many people are interested. Peter Thiel, Jeff Bezos, I know that both of them have expressed a desire to want to live forever, but I think that's honestly a shame, because I think that just shows that they haven't really come to terms with their mortality, which they are going to be, you know, they're mortal either way. Even if they manage to live a few hundred years, they're still mortal. So I think that's maybe where their efforts should go to, kind of coming to terms with them, you know, mortality, rather than trying to do this crazy stuff to extend their life. Because for what purpose? You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I look at it is like, I don't know. I mean, I think that I'm almost like for it. I mean, it's one thing if it's just not going to happen. Like it's one thing if, like you said, like they haven't come to terms with their own mortality and they just don't want to. It's just like a shot in the dark type thing. Like hopefully we can get something going within the next 30 years to where we can live forever. But to me, it's kind of like the whole. Like, don't get me wrong. I kind of agree with you that I don't think that I want to live forever, and I probably wouldn't want to live till I was 200 or 300. But like, I mean, when it comes down to it, like the purpose of life is kind of like to survive and to live, essentially, right? And if we can actually get to a point where we are prolonging our lives, because at one point we were living, you know, a couple hundred years ago, even we were living till we were like 30, 40. now we're living to 100 or more.
Yeah.
But there obviously are bad implications, like, how many people can we have living till they're 200 or 300, and then, like, what kind of life is it going to be like? But it's a very interesting topic, I think, like, because I've heard that, like, we might eventually be able to get to that point, and I don't know how long it'll be. But do you think that there's a possibility that, like, way in the future we could essentially, like, actually live forever? Like, do you think that's eventually possible?
I mean, I think it's possible to live for much longer. It's like, I'm sure it's theoretically possible to live for much, much, much longer than we currently are. I don't think it's possible to live forever, because at some point, the sun is going to swallow the earth, and yeah, okay, maybe we can go to another planet, but I don't think anything is like truly forever.
Yeah.
But and all kinds of other things could happen as well, like, like, let's say, for example, if you just didn't age at all and you were immune to, like, getting any illnesses. Like, what happens if you, I don't know, fall off somewhere or get hit by a car? Like, there are all kinds of other things that can can get you as well. But I think it's a healthier attitude to come to terms with the fact that maybe you'll live 150 years, maybe you'll live another 2 years. You just don't know. But if you embrace the fact that you don't know that, and just focus on doing what makes you happy and making the most of every day, I think that's the best way to live. Because clinging on to some kind of a dream of, oh, okay, maybe I could live for a couple thousand years, few hundred years, if this technology works out in time, like, chances are it's not going to work out, and you at that point you've just, like, wasted a bunch of your life, like, trying to live longer. And I don't know, it just doesn't sound like, to me anyway, that's just not an appealing kind of mindset.
Yeah, and then, I mean, what do you think about, like, Ray Kurzweil, his stuff? Have you read the book, like, The Singularity is Near?
I haven't actually, so no, I don't know too much about
You don't
that.
know too much about him, but you know who he is, right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So, in terms of one question always have about AI itself is, people are calling things AI all the time. They're like, oh, this is AI, but have we actually gotten to the point where it really is truly AI? Like, it's really artificial intelligence. It's literally, like, acting on its own volition. Is there anything that does that, or is everything pretty much just programmed and then it's told to do something? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Many things are called AI that simply are not. There are, I mean, it depends what you mean by AI. I mean, by the sort of generally accepted definition of that term, which I think is very different to how just the general public perceives it. I think we absolutely do have AI, yes. I think oftentimes when people hear that acronym, they will think of, like, a computer that kind of emulates a human and is, like, smarter than a human. That's not the application of a lot of AI. It's very sort of domain specific. So, like, let's say ChatGPT, it generates text. It can't, like, really think for itself, but it can generate text in a way that isn't, sort of pre-programmed. And for my final year like major project at university, what I did is I built a system that would predict how audiences would respond to new news articles. So I could predict, for the major newspapers in the UK, how their audience would respond to new articles before they were published, like before the audience would actually respond. So I'd say, like, that is AI, but it's not, like, emulating what a human does exactly. So it's very like, machine intelligence, artificial intelligence is very different from, like, human intelligence or just biological intelligence in general from what we've seen. And so yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely here, but what it is different to, I think, what the general perception of it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and do you think we'll get to a point where it is fully functioning AI? Like we'll literally have robots that are like almost like acting as humans out in the world, where they'll just be. Do you think it'll ever get to that point?
Oh, I mean, I think absolutely. It's certainly theoretically possible, but whether that robot in that case, even if the robot acts 100% like a human and you can't tell the difference, is that robot conscious? Can that robot feel emotion, or does it just sort of act in a way that emulates emotion? Personally, I don't think that it is possible for us with our, the technology that we have now to actually create sentient machines. I don't believe that I don't want to say it's impossible, because obviously sentience and consciousness is a possibility. We know that for a fact. But
Do we?
well, I mean, I know that I'm conscious.
Well, no. I mean, like, do you think that we know for a fact that an AI or whatever you want to call it, a robot or a computer, could become sentient or conscious?
Well, I think that it more likely than not can't.
Oh,
I
okay,
think
okay.
with the current technology that we have, no. Um, but I think, look, like we don't really know what conscious, like, what makes you or I conscious. We don't really know. We don't even really know how to define that, outside of even knowing what it is, how it works. So I think that has to come first before we can really figure out whether a machine can be conscious. But I think with the current technology that we have, even if we have a machine that can act exactly like a human, I don't think it will be conscious.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I've talked to a lot of people who are like, well, what if we build a robot and it's conscious? Like, how are we going to treat it? Like, we can't treat it like slaves. And it's like, well, I don't think that it will be conscious. Like, I don't think that unless we literally make it so it can like feel and touch and see and have emotions like sadness, which I don't think we would probably really put that into it unless, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't even think we can, like you said, I don't even think we can, right?
We
So
can absolutely make something that emulates it very effectively.
that's very
But
different, you know what I mean?
that's the, yeah, I mean, but that's the other question. Like, how would you know if something is sentient or not? Like, you don't know if I'm sentient. I don't know if you're sentient. Like, yeah, probably, sure, but like, we don't know with absolute certainty. So I think, like, there are some, like, let's say you had a robot. Like, let's say like, I was a robot. Let's say it's like 100 years in the future, and I'm a robot, and and I, like, I look like a human, and I'm talking like a human, I can respond to you like a human, but I, I'm not actually conscious. Like, or like, how could you tell if I was conscious or not? Because I'm acting in a way that, yeah, you would think I'm conscious. So I think we'll absolutely be able to make robots and machines that are very convincing in that they feel emotion, that they're conscious, but in reality won't be.
Yeah, and you think that that's true pretty much forever. Like they'll never get to a point where the thing is, I don't really know what would make them. I don't know what would make them conscious. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and we don't even know what makes us conscious. But I don't like believe that like just because something, just because we make a robot that becomes really smart, I don't think it's just gonna like snap and be like, okay, I'm conscious now. And what are your
I
thoughts
don't
on
think so.
what are your thoughts like on our consciousness? You said we don't know, but like, do you think it's would you say that it's more of like an evolutionary type thing, where like somewhere along the line we just kind of became conscious, or do you think it's more of like a religious thing, like we were created to have consciousness?
I mean, the most honest answer I can give you is I do not have a clue. um, I,
Yeah.
I, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. It's such an interesting topic to think about, but the conclusion that I've kind of come to is I don't even, like, ultimately, I don't even know if I'm capable of figuring out, or even if somebody told me, like understanding the truth. I mean, like think about it this way. Like take a cat, for example. Let's say you had to explain how the internet works to a cat. That's never going to happen. You're never going to be able to do that. Like you can, sure, you can maybe communicate with the cat in some way, but like the cat is not capable of understanding how the internet works.
Yeah.
So same thing is true, and that's with a cat. With us, I think it would be quite arrogant of us to think that we are somehow special and are capable of understanding everything. Yeah, sure, we can understand more than a cat, but there's still like a whole lot of room, I'm sure, above that of stuff that we are just completely incapable of understanding. So I think that's also something to factor in here. Like, I don't know if we are even like any human is even capable of understanding the stuff, even if it were right in front of us. So
Yeah.
that's another.
Do you think we'll ever get to a point that we can, probably through AI, right? That would probably be like through like some sort of like superhuman AI type thing where it can somehow figure out, the nature of the universe or whatever, and figure everything out.
Well, I think we'll be able to get a whole lot closer. I'm sure with AI we'll be able to get a lot further than we ever would without it. But I don't know if we'll ever be, because like AI is still a human creation. I mean, AI is typically only as good as the data that it's trained on, and we supply that data set, and we're human. So I don't know. I think it'll help us get further, probably a lot further with our understanding than we are currently. But I think there's still a limit, and I think that limit is far below, the actual limit of what's out there. But yeah, I mean, personally, I'm not a religious person, but I absolutely don't refute that there might well be a sort of a creator, be it a god. I don't know. The thing is, like, ultimately what it comes down to is I just don't know. That's the most honest answer.
Yeah. And in terms of the consciousness thing, like you asked, like, how do I know that you're real? And it's like, I just kind of believe that you're real because there's kind of like no reason for me not to believe that you're real. You know what I mean? It's like, just like I'm talking to you and I'm talking to my girlfriend, or, I talk to my girlfriend, I talk to friends, everything seems to kind of like make sense. So I'm not kind of like, I almost view it as kind of being like a conspiracy. Obviously probably would be kind of a conspiracy theory to be like, you're not real. Like, you were sent from the future. I know what you're saying. I know like that is a possibility, you know what I mean? But I just kind of like tend to believe what's going on is real, and you are a real conscious being. But in terms of the yeah.
I mean, I've just got a follow-up question for you, which is, have you ever had a conversation with someone in a dream?
Yeah.
And have you ever dreamt and where you like remember in your dream you thought this was reality? Like, have you ever had a dream where you didn't know, that you were dreaming, basically?
Yes. Yeah.
So how do you know you're not dreaming right now?
Because I feel like there's a clear distinction between dreaming and being awake. Like right now, I know, and I kind of like see what you're saying, but I don't really know if I don't personally like believe it. You know what I mean? Like, I personally believe that I'm awake and I was just dreaming then. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're awake, but regardless, I mean, what my point is your brain is obviously capable of like tricking you into thinking something is a reality when it's not, like a dream. So like, what if this isn't dreaming right now, but this still isn't like quite reality, if that makes sense? Like, what if you're currently, I don't know, in some kind of a video game, let's say, where you don't have, like memories or knowledge or something, like whatever outside of it, until you kind of like exit the game or whatever, and then suddenly, you're like completely different person, a completely other life, like almost like you've like woken up from this, and this isn't like, no, it's not quite a dream, sure, but still it's, you're like tricking yourself into thinking something is reality, which isn't. Yeah, I don't know, it's a very weird kind of rabbit hole to go down, but I think again, ultimately, the bottom line that I always arrive at, like when I think about this kind of stuff, is just the one thing I know is that I don't know anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's hard to prove either way. But in terms of the consciousness thing, have you heard about like idealism versus like materialism and all that kind of stuff? The like,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you would you say you're like an idealist or a materialist? Do you have any viewpoints on the consciousness debate?
Um. Yeah, I'm honestly not quite sure, to be honest. How about you?
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I've had, so for one, I'm like I've said, I'm interested in tech and I'm interested in AI, but then I had a couple of guys on about consciousness, and I thought consciousness was just kind of like going back and forth on like, how do you think how do you, like we were having before, like how do you think we're conscious or whatever, like why do you think we're conscious, this and that. But then I've had a couple of guys on talk about the whole idealism versus materialism thing, and I knew nothing about it, and I still don't know very much about it. But I would say if I had to choose, that I'm a materialist in the sense that like I just said, I believe that you're really there, I believe this desk is here. But I find the whole idealist perspective to be very fascinating, which is, that we're like living in consciousness, and it just doesn't really even make sense to me. But the guy who I was talking with, he was actually from Saudi Arabia, was saying that makes more sense to him, that we're like living in consciousness. And it's a very fascinating thing to think about, I think, and I don't know if you have any actual like scientific, I've heard it's actually might be more scientific to believe idealism because of based on like quantum physics and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's really tricky because, to us, what is in front of us is real, but maybe like all of that is, inside of something else, like simulation or conscious, inside of consciousness, something like that. I mean, think about it like in a video game, like to the video game character, the world around is real, but to you it isn't, it's inside of a video game. So it's like kind of similar to that. So I don't know. It's a very interesting, certainly a very interesting thing to think about. I probably lean more towards the idealist, but then again, yeah, I'm just not sure. I mean, it's like the do you know the simulation kind of theory by Nick Bostrom?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that I find that quite interesting. I think I do believe it, I do think that the chance of us, of like this being base reality, is very low. So yeah, it's all very, very interesting. But I mean, do you believe that, out of curiosity, what Nick Bostrom says? Yeah.
The simulation theory. I mean, the whole thing is kind of like you said, like I don't know. I don't think anybody knows for sure. And I would just say no, just because, only because, like I said, I guess I just believe that, I believe in base reality. I have no reason to not believe in base reality. Like if I was an actual physicist and I was actually doing some sort of like scientific experiments, because the whole thing where like when you're looking at like an atom or whatever it is, and then it's there, but then when you look away, it's like not there. You know what I'm talking about with, yeah. So with that type of, if I knew more about that type of stuff, maybe I would have more of a reason to believe that like we're not living in base reality. And Nick Bostrom's whole argument, basically, that isn't the whole argument basically based on the fact that like if we live long enough, we eventually will create these simulations, and so therefore every civilization probably has created these civilizations, so you're probably living in one. Isn't that kind of like an easy way to
Yeah,
like,
pretty much, yeah.
yeah. And because of that, that does make sense, but I don't think it really changes anything. And also it's like, um it's like there's really no reason to kind of like believe that I'm in a video game or a simulation or whatever. But then also, I wouldn't really imagine that like anybody would really want to like live my life. So it's like, and I don't really know what their purpose of my simulation would be. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I've got an interesting theory that might be worth thinking about, which is
yeah,
like let's say you play a video game. Video games have like obviously different settings. You can put it in like hard mode, expert mode, whatever. Like why would you put it into expert mode? Why wouldn't you just put it into like god mode and have, unlimited health, unlimited ammo, whatever? Why wouldn't you just do that?
oh, to try and make the game like actually like competitive or hard to play.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would get boring. It would be fun maybe for a while if you were like invincible. Then like quite quick, it would get old. It would get boring. So that,
Yeah.
but it's more of a challenge if there's actually effort involved. And in the same way, what if, it just for, the sake of argument, you get to a point where you are going to live forever. You have everything you want in life. You're like, you're rich. You just have an abundance of everything. You don't have to work. It's boring. And then what if there was like, let's say, some kind of a video game where you forget about that, and for some time you're actually just like living a life where there are actually challenges involved, and you kind of you don't just have that abundance, you are mortal, etc. Would you do that? Probably, well, possibly. I don't know, maybe given enough time of being bored.
Yeah. So you think that like whoever's playing the video game in their life, they could actually kind of have a life of abundance, and they're almost kind of like when they're playing the game of my life, it's almost kind of like more of like a realistic kind of like difficult type thing.
Well, I mean, I don't think that that's the case, or think that that's not the case, but I think it's an interesting kind of thought experiment. Same thing with the simulation argument. It's like that is a scenario where, yeah, okay, maybe that would make sense. Because I think, yeah, I mean, if tell you what, like if I knew that I was going to live forever and I couldn't do anything about that, I think in order to not go crazy, I would want to like restart my life, with like no memories, nothing, like every once in a while, right? Because otherwise it would just get boring. And I also wouldn't want to know that I was immortal, because it just makes things boring otherwise. Life. I think the mortality and a lot of the harsh realities we have in life is actually what gives us purpose. Because I think if those things went away, would be happy for a little bit, but would get so bored so fast.
Yeah, the question is like, would they want to play my life? I don't know, but what you're saying does make sense. It's almost like you're putting the game in like difficult mode or whatever,
Yeah.
and or maybe even like, I don't know, realistic boring mode. But yeah, and in terms of, well, one question I wanted to ask was um if we are living in a simulation, like why would they create, and you just answered one of the questions, but I've also heard somebody say that like they could like maybe like learn from the simulation, and it's like maybe they're kind of almost like watching, like maybe they're not even like in the simulation, but they're like watching the simulation play out, and I
Yeah.
guess almost like see what happens. Does that make sense? Like,
Of course. I mean, it could very well be, maybe you want to kind of simulate what would the world be like if you tweaked a couple of things, based on how it was. I don't know. There are I think infinite reasons as to what it could be. It could be for entertainment. It could be like a super, advanced version of like a reality TV show. It could be any number of things. Or it could be that whatever world this advanced civilization lives in, is like either the world is like destroyed and this is they basically have to live in like a virtual world to just have a nice time, or they are in a position where they just have so much abundance that they want to actually introduce some like bit of challenge back into their lives, bit of purpose. I don't know, it could be like really anything.
Yeah, and that's similar to like what we're doing, right? Like when we play video games, it's like we want to challenge ourselves. We don't want it just to be easy for like you were saying. And that other situation would be kind of like the Matrix, right? Where it's like when you see the real world, it's like all burnt down and all messed up, and then people just like sleeping in little, whatever, like
Yeah, like liquid or something.
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie in a while. But then also the people who made the simulation, do you think that it would be kind of like, do you think there's more of a possibility that it would be like future us, or do you think it would be like alien civilizations? Like, who do you think would be the one building the civilization or building the simulation?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to say. I think you can probably like come up with a logical reason for any answer to that question, or like to many different answers to that question at the very least. I don't know. I mean, it's possibly sort of some civilization that's in some way so similar to us, because same thing like in video games, there's usually some kind of link to reality, so probably at the very least some civilization that's like similar to us in some way. But yeah, I mean, I think it's impossible to know.
Yeah, that's kind of like why it's like hard to talk about, because it's just impossible to know. And so in terms of like the future of AI and tech, where do you see everything going in terms of like a futurology perspective? And do you think things are going like in a good direction or bad direction?
I think in good and bad. I think it's kind of it's a mixed bag. I mean, in a lot of ways, technological advancements are making people's lives better, but in other ways it's also making people's lives a lot worse. Like, for example, the internet and just communities online have brought back some of the more negative traits of humans that we kind of moved towards, or like kind of got rid of, have now returned, such as, for example, tribalism. Because let's say in the days before the internet, if you had some kind of a extreme kind of crazy idea, you'd talk to people about it, they tell you no, that's crazy, you'd basically, it would be kind of be like evened out because people would talk reason into you. But now if you have some kind of crazy idea, you can just go online, you find a subreddit or whatever, and you can basically just find an echo chamber, so you can like surround yourself only with people who have that same opinion. And that has led to, I think, just society becoming a lot more divided, and this kind of tribalistic just nature of people coming back out again. So I think, yeah, it's a real mixed bag. But and then of course on the other hand, the internet has done so many good things for civilization. So I think the internet is probably a net positive, but it's very much a mixed bag of good things and bad things. I think the same thing is true with it's going to be true with technologies that come in the near future. Like AI is going to do a lot of good and it's going to do a lot of harm. But exactly how that plays out, I think, is to a large degree up to us. So yeah, I think it's hard to say. I mean, the one prediction I think that I will quite confidently make is that self-driving like delivery vehicles that are roadworthy, like I'm not talking about drones or something else now, but like, delivery vehicles that can drive on roads alongside regular cars that are autonomous, I think are decades away, if not potentially they will never be a thing. But like, I'm talking easily 50, 100 years we won't see them. Even if the technology is there, even if the technology is possible, just from like a regulatory compliance, like safety, risk management, all these different things, responsibility if there's a crash, the trolley problem, all these different questions that are just, there aren't good answers to them.
Yeah, and that's one thing that people don't really kind of seem to think about when talking about this issue, because a lot of people think that the AI is bad and it's going to kill us or whatever. But I'm sure that we're gonna. I'm hoping, and I'm pretty sure that like our government's going to be smart enough to be like, okay, like we're not just going to like allow this. You know what I mean? Like if this isn't working, like I think we see it coming, or at least we should. We should have a government, even though a lot of our government is like older and doesn't like fully understand technology. They should be able to be like, okay, maybe this isn't such a good idea to just let these AI like run wild or whatever, And I pretty much agree with you with the self-driving cars, like what we said before. What about, I was going to ask you before when we were talking about this, what about other jobs? Like we were actually, my co-host is a salesman, and the other guy who we had on, who was a lawyer and writer, he was saying that he thinks that AI will eventually even be able to be salesmen, but I think it would mostly be like over the phone salesman. I don't think that it'll really be like, it'd be kind of weird to have like a robot salesman, you know what I mean? Like go to the game with you or whatever. But what kinds of, well, first of all, do you think that it'll be able to take over like a salesman job? But then also, what are some of the other jobs that it will be able to take over? Like, do you think it'll eventually get to a point where it'll take over like a doctor's job or a lawyer's job or an accountant's job?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, accountant, yes, 100%. I think it's basically already happening to a large degree. But that
Like
being
with
said,
TurboTax and stuff.
exactly. But that
Yeah.
being said, those softwares still make mistakes, which is why. But that's why I think that AI is going to take over a lot of the sort of lower jobs, like maybe more junior kind of positions, but then the more senior roles are going to stay because you basically need someone to do a sanity check. So the AI will like replace a lot of the kind of grunt work, but then you have like, let's say a senior chartered accountant who will just check things over, give it a sanity check, sign it off kind of thing. But then rather than having like, 10 junior accountants preparing reports and stuff, you then have the AI doing that. Same thing with copywriting. You have ChatGPT, for example, writing all your articles, and then you have like one sort of senior editor who edits them and makes them right and then publishes them, rather than having a bunch of writers writing them. So I think that kind of pattern, I think, is going to is going to be like basically what's going to happen with a lot of jobs in different industries, where their humans are still involved, like in a reduced but like consultative capacity. So yeah, and I think it's definitely theoretically possible for AI to replace all of the jobs that you mentioned and more. But I think as for when it will replace what, it's going to be, it's going to be incremental.
Yeah. And yeah, what you were saying earlier too about the internet basically tribalizing people, and Twitter mainly. Like I don't really get involved too much on Twitter or like Reddit. I don't really like comment or post too much on those places, mainly just because I just don't really like, writing's not really my thing. Reading and writing's not really my thing. I'm more of like a Instagram pictures guy. But But even when I do go on there and I see somebody's viewpoint that I don't like, and I see another person's viewpoint that I do like, I always, I obviously root for the person that I'm. It really is just kind of like a natural human thing to be like, this guy's right and this guy's wrong and this guy's evil and this guy's good and I need to support this guy. But speaking of which, I don't know if you heard, this guy went on Joe Rogan about a couple weeks ago, and he's a journalist. He went to the Congo and found out that there was a bunch of like child slavery going on to make cobalt, or get cobalt for the iPhones and the electric vehicles. You heard about all that? So that's something.
Yeah.
That's a situation where I'm like, we need to get this guy. This guy needs to. I'm trying to like everything he's saying and whatever else, because this guy something needs to be done about this. And these companies are ruthless companies that are just exploiting. They're saying that like we're doing like good stuff, we're making the world more green, but meanwhile we're like just totally exploiting the Congo. And yeah. I was just wondering if you heard about all that and what your thoughts on that is.
I have, and I mean, yeah, these large companies, it's absolutely horrible, and I hope that it gets more attention, that there's pressure for them to stop, kind of supporting those kind of operations, and just find a more ethical and sustainable way of getting the cobalt that they need.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes without saying that, like, we're at a point now where like we just need to do something about it, and if that means stop buying their iPhones, I guess, which is a hard thing to do because everybody like needs an iPhone just to like get through your day. But
the issue is that all phones use lithium ion batteries, so I'm willing to bet that it's not just Apple iPhones that are.
No, yeah, he said that it's all of them, and not only smartphones, but probably anything that uses a rechargeable battery, I guess, which is a ton of things, right?
It's like, so many things. I mean, Bluetooth headphones, Bluetooth speakers, like just so many different gadgets and things nowadays use lithium ion batteries. If you have solar panels or something, though, they're charging up a lithium ion battery. It's absolutely everywhere.
Yeah. So back to the in terms of the future, if you could have kind of like an idea where things are going overall with technology, like in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, do you have any,
there's one thing that concerns me more than anything else, which is that with automation and a lot of jobs being replaced, I think that we're going to have a larger and larger group of people who are not capable of doing any kind of work that cannot be like automated more effectively for cheaper. So basically they won't have work. And the question is then like, what can be done about that? Because something must be done about that. I think people at that point need to have a universal basic income. There needs to be some kind of way for these people to still have a purpose in their life, and there are lots of things that they'll be able to do that maybe on making a company a profit, but actually doing useful things for their community, or just for people around them. But I think that's something that needs to be addressed, like by governments, like more or less immediately. A plan needs to be put in place, because this is already starting to sort of happen. It's only going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, and like somebody like Andrew Yang came up with he didn't come up with it, but he proposed that we do the UBI, and I don't know if he had like a good enough plan for. I don't know. Do you think that UBI could work? Like if they did like what he said and gave everybody $1,000 a month, do you think that's like a reasonable thing to do?
Well, I think it's absolutely a necessary thing to do, because at some point, at that point, like there will be a sizable group of people out there who just are not employable essentially, because they don't have the skills or ability to do any kind of job that can't be automated for cheaper. And companies will always, you know, try and seek the lowest, you know, not the highest bottom line, obviously. So they're going to look for the cheaper, more efficient option always. So either there needs to be a UBI, or there needs to be sort of government regulation to say that, you know, companies still need to employ, you know, a minimum number of people, or you know, just kind of, but then the other issue is that's going to stifle innovation then, and then other countries like possibly China, who wouldn't bring in a law like that, will then massively outperform a country that brings in a law like that. So I don't know, it's tricky, but yeah, I do think a UBI is absolutely a necessity. It will be a necessity in the very near future.
And do you think we'll ever get to a point where it's possible? Because I've actually heard, you know, physicists on Joe Rogan or whatever talk, like Sean Carroll, talk about this, how it could eventually get to a point where like people don't really have to work, like, because if it gets to a point where AI and robots are doing everything, and if that's the case, how do you see the economy working in that case? Like, do you think all like the big companies like Amazon and Google will just kind of like pay everyone like a stipend or something just to live, and then do you think that's ever a possibility of just humans not working, basically?
I mean, that's what we're heading towards, you know, like
Completely
quickly or slowly, it's definitely what we're heading towards. So yeah, I think it's possible. I have no idea what the economy would look like. We might not even really have an economy at that point. But I mean, there has been this big race with big tech companies to basically, like, you know, this big race to the bottom. You know, like right now you can use Google search, Google Maps, you know, like all of these like just crazy technologies. You can use them completely for free, you know, and like, yeah, they make money from advertising or whatnot, but basically like these large tech companies are like undercutting each other and like all buying competitors. So it's, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the end goal there is really, because what all they're going to do is basically drive you know, just drive the cost of everything down to nothing. You know, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. What concerns me most about this though is, and maybe this is just a me thing, but for me, like a lot of my purpose, I guess, I find from my work. And I think that if I wouldn't have the opportunity to work, you know, I wouldn't have that kind of challenge, wouldn't need to work because, you know, I'd have that abundance, then there would be that problem of, you know, it's like playing a video game in God mode. It's fun for like 10 minutes and then it's just boring. You know, you want that challenge, but you can't really get out of it.
Yeah. The problem that I have like with that argument is like, I think there's a lot of people who really do find, and this really could be for everyone, because I get the point. Like, I've been unemployed before, and like you said, after a week of being unemployed, you're like, oh man, this sucks, you know. But I feel like there's a lot of jobs like your job, CEO or a lawyer maybe, or like that are really fulfilling. But I also feel like there's a lot of jobs that just aren't fulfilling, and there's a lot of people out there who probably are just miserable at their job. And I do get the point that there is something about going to work and working a 40-hour week, and then you feel kind of good at the end of the week, as opposed to being like, but at the same time, I do think that like there are other things that I think that I would enjoy doing. Like I can still go and take pictures. I can still go and I can do podcasts. I can, you know, as long as you are doing something else that is fulfilling, and because I definitely get more in terms of fulfillment. I definitely get more fulfillment out of doing this or doing what I love as opposed to doing my job. You know what I mean? But like I said, there is something about a job that just does make you feel like, okay, I have accomplished something this week, you know, that I guess gave me money or whatever. But yeah, you also mentioned, yeah.
I think I mean, I'm very happy to hear that. I think I might just be a bit weird, in the sense that I'm a bit of an like natural workaholic. I'm sort of drawn to that more than anything else. My New Year's resolution is to find a better work-life balance. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I very much hope, that most people think that way and get, and can find purpose out of so many other things that aren't work related, because I think then, then there won't be a problem. But I think, if everyone thought like me, we would all be very, very depressed if there wasn't, any work there anymore. But I don't think that's the right way to be.
Yeah, and in terms of like the ad model, you mentioned like kind of like the YouTube, Google model. Do you think there's any like downside to that model besides just being infiltrated with ads constantly, or do you think that's a good model?
Well, I am not a huge fan of the whole tracking aspect that comes with it, because to serve ads that advertisers will be willing to pay a lot of money for, they need to be extremely highly targeted, which means you need to, as a company, monitor and track your users to a very extreme degree, like companies like Google and Meta do. And we saw that, I'm just going to call them Facebook, but we saw that Facebook, they had an absolutely like horrendous year, and that all
Yeah.
started with Apple blocking their sort of like super invasive tracking, or like cross application tracking, and because of that they took such a huge financial hit, which just shows you like how much they're reliant on tracking people to like a really creepy degree. But the what scares me about that is the power that comes with that. So like for the company, for any government that gets access to that, for any kind of, let's say, a hacker who breaks into their database and gets access to that, it's a lot of kind of power that I wish just wasn't there, so nobody could exploit that. So yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the ad model, to be honest, personally. Also, ads are annoying from like a just the end user perspective.
Yeah.
So I'm more in favor of like a subscription model. I think a subscription model is a win-win for company and consumer. That might be a bit of an unpopular opinion, but running a company where we rely on a subscription model, I mean, the ongoing like maintenance of the platform, support you give to your customers and so on, it needs to be compensated. You can't really just charge one like lump sum up front and then never again. It's just not really a good model. But also for the consumer, like rather than paying, let's say, $200 up front, then you get it for life, just paying $10 per month, it's like over time, sure, you'll pay more than $200, but like if you look at it just month by month or year by year, it's a much smaller financial commitment. So that's why I think it's a win-win for both sides. But yeah, I'm not a fan of ad models at all, really. I think they're a thing of the past.
Oh, do you think they're actually going to go away because of the whole like intrusiveness of it?
Um, I hope so. I very well might be wrong, but I think
Yeah.
I think longer term, I don't. I think the car. I mean, there's a lot of kind of noise as well now, as about companies and consumers caring more about privacy, governments kind of getting more involved in that sort of thing. So I think the general trend is moving slowly towards kind of stifling that model, at least the super invasive tracking kind of model that Facebook has been reliant on for a very long time.
Yeah, and YouTube does also have the option of paying, as you probably know, it's like 15 a month for no ads, and you can like literally like one of their things is you can turn the screen off and still listen to it, which is just like annoying that you can't do that. But I'm actually for the ad model only because I'm the type of person who doesn't really like to have a bunch of like monthly payments. I'm like, okay, whatever, just show me an ad. But I see what you're saying, and I think more people are probably agree with you, especially people with money. Like would rather just pay to not be annoyed. But what are your? I want to go over Meta real quick, and then we can end it on your company. So what do you think about Meta? And I mean, one thing I'll say about Mark Zuckerberg, is that I mean, all these guys, at least I could be totally wrong. Well, not I don't really like Bezos, but I'm just going off of a PR thing here, But Zuckerberg, at least I know in that movie he came off like a dick, but he seems at least a nice guy. And it's I almost and like I said before with Elon Musk, he did seem like a nice guy in those interviews. I don't know if he is or not, but yeah, I look at Meta and I'm at least he, even though it's not going good, at least he gave it a shot. You know what I mean? It's I don't even know if that's necessarily a good future. But not only what are your thoughts on Meta, but then also, do you think that it will work out? And also, do you see us moving more into kind of a literal virtual reality space, where we're literally able to do work online, and we can go to the bar online, we can go play poker with friends online or whatever. And also I was going to ask you this before too, do you think we'll eventually kind of become cyborgs, kind of where we literally team up with we're literally kind of wearing, and then there's also Neuralink too, but wearing kind of the technology on us into the future, what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of that, I think yes. I don't like that idea, but I do think that it's the reality, it's coming, especially with companies like Neuralink, trying to push heavily for it, and other companies too. Yeah, in terms of Facebook and Meta, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, from what I've seen, I don't think he's a particularly nice person. I think the movie, I mean, the movie is based on a book called The Accidental Billionaires, which was basically a very one-sided account of the guy he kicked out of the company. So the movie is completely inaccurate. Even the core premise of the movie is, how it starts with him getting dumped by a girl, and then he basically starts Facebook as this big kind of revenge / wants to prove himself kind of thing, and then at the end he's trying to add her on Facebook. In reality, that girl is fictional. He at that point had a partner who he is now married to, who he had all that time. So that just the core thing in the film is fiction. I mean, not all of the film is fiction, but it was written by the guy's arch enemy, so it's gonna obviously be it's gonna make him look terrible. But yeah, I mean, I don't like Meta's pivot at all. I really hope that we don't ever live in a world where we interact with just through VR. I wouldn't personally like that at all. I don't know if people in general would like that or not. I think with what's happened with Meta stocks since they became Meta, I think that if this is going to be a reality at some point, we're still maybe some way away, because their implementation, at least of the metaverse, is kind of looks awful. It's maybe they moved too early, but they had to do something because their stock was tanking because Apple stopped them from doing super invasive tracking. But the thing is, I don't know, it might just be that sort of ad-based invasive tracking social network model is just now a thing of the past, and that isn't going to resurface again. So it probably makes sense to pivot, but I think that they moved into something too fast, bet far too much on it, and now that bet, at least in the short term, has failed, because they had to lay off 13,000 employees or something as well, I believe, recently. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Mark Zuckerberg. I'm not a big fan of what Facebook did. I understand why they pivoted, but I don't like the pivot either. So I don't know. I'm just not a big fan overall. But it will be interesting to see how it all pans out in the longer term.
Yeah, in terms of how intelligent these guys. Well, first of all, I'm kind of surprised with that movie that he kind of allowed them to make him look so bad, but he just came off like said. Well, first of all, he came off like a jerk, but then he also came off like he didn't really seem to care. Like he kind of had this like punk kind of like attitude when they'd go into like talk to the CEOs or whatever. He'd just be kind of like he'd just like whatever, I don't give a shit about this. But then now he seems to be very, maybe he's just grown up and realized, you know, the importance of money or whatever. But also so yeah, I'm surprised that he allowed them to make him look like that. But then also, how intelligent do you think these guys are? Like, you know, the Bezoses and Zuckerbergs and Musk. Do you think it's more about intelligence, or do you think it's more about almost kind of like with Musk? I know a lot of it's about like how he's made himself look, but yeah, what do you think it is about these guys that have made them so successful?
To a very large degree, it's luck. I mean,
Really?
I hate saying it, you know, as like an entrepreneur myself, but to a very large degree, it's luck. They were, I mean, Facebook wasn't the first Facebook. There was Friendster before them. There was MySpace before them. But Facebook was the one who really made it big, you know, because they got the timing right. They sort of learned from what other people did in the market. They got their launch right. I mean, a lot of things just kind of aligned for them. And Mark Zuckerberg, when he founded Facebook, was like 19. You know, and like, yes, he had built other impressive projects before that, but he didn't have, you know, I don't know, 30, 40 years of industry experience under his belt. He had like nothing, you know, especially not in managing like a large company.
Yeah.
So I think to a large degree, it is luck. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that any of these guys are particularly unintelligent. I think they probably, you know, I mean, I don't know if I'm the best person to judge, but I think, yeah, they probably are quite intelligent, but I don't think that they're sort of these, you know, like Elon Musk especially, you know, he's not this kind of like genius, prodigy, smartest man in the world kind of image that he's portrays. I think he's very good at portraying that image, but I don't think it's the reality, you know. And I think, I mean, like Albert Einstein said that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll believe its whole life that it's, you know, thinking that it's stupid. And I really I love that quote, because I don't personally believe that, you know, someone is like either smart or not. I think there are so many different things, and I think
Yeah.
that the smartest thing to do is to identify what you're good at and then really focus on that. And I think in the case of Elon Musk, he's a good salesperson. He's good at making people like him, except for when he's tweeting recently, apparently. But, you know, like generally over the past decade or so, I think he's been very good at portraying this kind of likable image, being a good salesperson, getting investors excited about his company. And that's his strength. I don't think he's a, you know, this kind of like genius engineer or whatever that he says he is. But I think his strength is more in sort of sales and branding and that kind of thing.
Yeah. At this point, he's more of like
Yeah.
a almost like a socialite or something than he is like a business magnate. But
Yeah.
and then also I'm really surprised too with like you just said, with what he's been tweeting on. Some of the stuff is like this conspiracy theory type stuff. It's like, what is he doing? The only thing I can think of is like he's trying to maybe like um he's trying to get like the right wing types, like the conservative types to like him. I don't know, but I know he's pissing off a lot of like the liberals with what he's saying. So I don't really know why he's doing all that.
But I don't understand why does he want because
I
on the
don't know.
typical Tesla customers sort of more liberal, you know, so like he is actively pissing off the, you know, kind of average, you know, customer of a Tesla. I don't understand why he would do that. I mean,
I have
I
no
am
clue
all
what he's
for,
doing, man. Yeah.
like people can have their own opinion. I completely get that, but he has a responsibility as the CEO of that company, which many people have invested in, to not like let his personal views and personal vendetta like piss off and drive away his customer base. You know, it's,
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't get it.
Unless he's trying to have some sort of like he's trying to come off as like some sort of kind of like provocateur or something, which seems very weird that like a, you know, a businessman would
Yeah.
want to do that. But I mean, I don't but I mean, it's worth, everybody says, you know, he's worth, well, I guess he was the richest man, and now I guess he lost 200 billion recently or something. So
Yeah,
who knows? But I know we have to,
exactly.
you have to wrap things up, right? So I wanted to end on, how much time do you have? You got to end it too, right?
Yeah, I have a bit more time. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So I wanted to make sure to end on your company, and then yeah, so you're, yeah. So one last question, I guess, would be like, if I want, because I mean, at this point, I'm just pretty much picking your brain, you know what I mean, for information. But if I wanted to kind of like, well, one thing I wanted to ask is, what do you think about the Patreon model? And I guess now there's Patreon, but then there's kind of like a lot of other, like there's like OnlyFans didn't really mean to be like a sexually based thing when it started, right? So there's a, I don't know, there's Patreon. It seems like Patreon's the main one. Are there other ones that are like not? But anyways,
Well,
how do you think about those models? The Patreon model.
um, I mean, I think it's a, you know, it's a great way for creators, audiences to support them. But I think at scale, it's more about, I mean, I don't know, because I haven't, I don't, yeah, I don't think I've ever donated to someone's Patreon or sort of supported a creator in that particular way. But, you know, I would be far more likely to, for example, buy some kind of a merch, you know, and I think that's more where I think creators should be looking, you know, because that way their audience can support them, but they directly get something back. Rather than just sort of basically donating money possibly to someone who has a lot more money than you do, especially if it's like a larger creator. I think that's more,
Oh
you know, kind
yeah.
of where you like have a business where they can support you, but also they get something, like they buy a t-shirt or whatever it is. So that's, yeah, but I think, you know, it's especially if you're kind of like more starting out, then it's a great way to monetize your audience. I mean, YouTube has a built-in feature for that too now, I think. It's called like a channel member or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Patreon is still the, you know, the big one that I think everyone immediately thinks of and uses.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like, I've only subscribed to one podcast on Patreon, and it was $5 a month. So it's, in my opinion, it is a good, it is a good deal. And I didn't realize how much some of these podcasts were getting. And the guys that I'm listening to are making $18,000 a month, but then some of the other guys are making like $100,000 a month, $200,000 a month on Patreon. I had no clue about this world. I'm like, man, these guys are really. And then it kind of gets to a point where I'm kind of I don't know. It kind of gets to a point where like these guys are making too much. So you know what I mean? It's kind of like, I want to support the smaller guy, not so much the guy who's making $100,000 a month. If that makes sense, like just with human nature in general. Like, I'm the type of person who I'm like, and this happens, you know, like in the music scene or whatever, where like somebody gets too big, and then it's like, okay, they're too big, but then they still have this. It's kind of weird, but like they'll still have this hardcore fan base. But me, I'm kind of like, when somebody gets, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here with my thoughts on this, but when somebody gets too big, I tend to be like, okay, I want to like support somebody who's smaller. I think kind of like what you were saying. I don't really want to like give more money to somebody who already is basically rich off this, you know. But so yeah, lastly, in terms of what I should do, or like let's just say I want to get into, I want to make my own app, which I can't do because I don't code. But I want to make my own app, or I want to do a website, or for me specifically, it would be, I want to build my YouTube following, my Instagram following. I want to try and monetize that. What are some pieces of advice you can give to entrepreneurs to make money online?
Sure. I mean, I am definitely this, you know, in terms of building an audience on social media, it's not something I know terribly much about. We work with a bunch of influencers at Revolancer, though. I think what it comes down to is you really have to understand how the algorithm of whatever social media you're on works and what they kind of prioritize. And then you sort of have to like trial and error, but you have to try and cater to that, which is the unfortunate reality. I mean, I wish the advice was more along like, you know, make what you're passionate about. And if your goal, you know, is to make just, you know, do it as a hobby, or you don't particularly care about where it ends up going, then absolutely do what you're passionate about. But if you're specifically looking for growth as your like primary target, then study how the algorithm works, like what it tends to recommend, how often you should post, what time you should post, who's your target audience, what are they looking for, look at like, you know, competing accounts, what kind of content are they publishing, what kind of content that they publish does well, you know, and kind of do a lot of research on that, and then trial and error. And then just like consistency over time. Oftentimes, you know, growth on social media can be exponential. So in other words, you can spend a year getting 100 followers, and by the, you know, and then within a month you have 500, within a year you have 10,000, you know, so like it's very much exponential. So especially at the beginning, I think it's, you really have to be very consistent and stick with it, and, you know, keep going even if you aren't immediately seeing like the big growth and results that you're looking for.
And then what about creating like an app? Like, is that a pretty difficult thing to do? Like, if I personally wanted to learn how to create an app, is that like a pretty difficult thing to do, to make an app?
No, not really. I mean, it's definitely, I mean, there are kind of frameworks you can use that where you can develop like both an Android and an iPhone app at the same time. The other thing you can do is, if you wanted to sort of launch this as a startup, is like find a technical co-founder. Like I obviously studied a technical degree myself, but I don't do any development at my company. My co-founder Sky, who's our CTO, does that, you know, with a team of developers. So yeah, I mean, ideally, I'd say find somebody who can help you and then get them involved, because, you know, I think that a project works best when everyone focuses on their strengths. So rather than like trying to learn something new, I mean, if you want to learn how to build an app, then absolutely, you know, do it, if that, you know, if that's what you want to do. But if you're sort of focused on what's the best way to get from 0 to 1 with like getting this app out and launched, is like you focus on your strengths, which might be more like the branding, business marketing side, and then get someone else who's, you know, has built many apps in the past, has done it for the past 10 years, get them to build it for you, you know, because then you have the best of both worlds. So yeah, it depends what exactly it is you're looking to achieve, but oftentimes, you know, I think it's good to work in a team with complementary strengths.
Okay, and then yeah, so I wanted to give you this time to you know, plug your company, obviously, and then also I normally will ask like if there's any good podcasts you listen to, or movies or TV shows. I just kind of like ask everybody that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, if anyone who's listening is a freelancer and you don't want to pay commission fees, then check out Revolancer. And in terms of like podcasts that I listen to, there's one in particular that I really like, which is called Diary of a CEO, which I really like because, I mean, it's not just CEOs on that, it's also different celebrities being featured. It's by a guy called Steve Bartlett. But he asks people questions that they don't usually get asked in an interview, like especially around like what have been some like more difficult times in your life and your journey, you know, and just have like a much deeper conversation rather than, you know, just kind of like, oh, to what do you owe your success, or, you know, these kind of cliche questions. So that's one that I would definitely recommend checking out if you're interested in entrepreneurship or setting up a business.
All right, great. And I don't know if there's any movies or TV shows you wanted to plug, but
I mean, I love Better Call Saul. I've been watching it for like the 7th time now, so there we go.
Oh wow, did you like it more than Breaking Bad?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Breaking Bad, but Better Call Saul, I watched every single episode like the day it aired from the first season until the last. So I think I've probably got like more of a connection to that one.
Yeah, I'm Breaking Bad's my favorite show, and I at one point I said it's the best piece of art period ever made. Like out of
It
like
is incredible,
anything.
yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely insane. And then Better Call Saul, I like the only problem that I had with it was a little bit slower than I wanted it to be, you know. I don't know if you like
Yeah,
that aspect
until
of it until the end.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, it did get like quite irritating sometimes. Yeah, especially I think probably like seasons 1 through 4 are quite slow. 5 starts picking up a bit more, especially with the I don't know, I shouldn't spoil anything, but with the new character who comes about like right at the end of season 4. And then obviously season 6, like it really starts kicking off. But I think it was worth the wait, to be honest.
Yeah. And then what's your last question? And sorry if I didn't go over your company enough, because I know I kind of got
No,
like
not
out there with questions, but yeah. All right.
not at all. No,
And
I'm enjoying the conversation.
yeah, me too. Thanks for coming on. You were very knowledgeable and polite guest. So yeah, the last question will be where do you see where do you want your company to go in the next 5 years? Like how big do you want it to grow?
Well, I mean, my main goal is to really change this industry permanently and for the better. So, whether that means that we influence the other larger players to adapt, whether they acquire us, whether we become a large player in the industry, whichever way it goes, my goal is to change this industry for the better, because for far too long has it been so kind of anti-freelancer, or just, freelancers have been so disadvantaged that ultimately it's creating a negative experience for everyone, including the clients too. And my goal is, for platforms to empower freelancers much more, and that way ultimately that we're creating the best experience for the clients as well, and that everybody wins.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for coming on, Karl. Like I said, you were a great guest, and hope the best to your company.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No problem. And if you ever want to come back on, I always offer that to my guests. Just let me know.
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Bye.